I can't get that fired up to the point where I'm bumping Coach and it's getting him off balance and stuff.
So that's part I love about him. I mean, the guy's all in. Just sometimes I have to be the policeman.
The fiery relationship between Andy Reid and Travis Kelce has been the foundation of the Chiefs' dynasty. However, fresh, heated video from their game against the Giants on September 22nd reveals more serious cracks than before. This wasn't just another argument on the sidelines. This conflict has the potential to completely upend their illustrious collaboration. And believe me, fans don't realize how bad it is. The most recent explosive altercation. Imagine this: a national television audience watched Sunday Night Football at Mayfi Stadium as the reigning champions battled through yet another slow start to the season. With more than 82,000 spectators crammed into the stadium, the atmosphere was electrifying. However, the atmosphere on the Chiefs' sideline conveyed a completely different message. The Chiefs had a 0-2 record going into this game, which was their worst start since Andy Reid moved to Kansas City more than 10 years ago. With every unsuccessful drive, lost chance, and instance that made it clear to everyone in the stands that this wasn't the same dominant Chiefs team that had won titles and won hearts, the pressure was growing. After just 6 catches for 45 yards in the first 2 games of the season, Travis Kelce, 36, was in what many believed to be his final season. These were not merely depressing figures. For a player who had revolutionized the tight end position and emerged as Patrick Mahomes' most reliable target, they marked a paradigm shift. His body language conveyed his frustration in every way. His agitated demeanor on the sidelines and his animated gestures during team meetings are examples. Some analysts even speculate that his outburst was caused by his age and the realization that he is aging and no longer has the same influence over games as he did in his prime. And that guy is Kelce. He is aware that he has changed. Additionally, he is unable to make up for the loss of Rashid Rice because he is no longer the same person he once was. The loss of a Xavier Worthy is too great for him to make up. The game had begun promisingly. However, it became more and more obvious as the first half went on that the Chiefs were having trouble finding any kind of offensive rhythm. The team only managed 130 yards of total offense in the first half, and drive after drive ended in punts, field goals, or worse. With a combination of aggressive pass rush and disciplined coverage, the Giants' defense under the direction of coordinator Wink Martindale was methodically destroying the Chiefs' attack, leaving Mahomes looking bewildered and frustrated. The tension that had been building finally reached a breaking point late in the first half, with the Chiefs trailing and their offense stuttering once more. NBC's cameras would record what transpired next, and it would quickly become one of the most talked about events of the NFL season. According to sources, Kelce was not only annoyed by the call, but also by his own play and the team's failure to perform when it mattered most. With his voice rising above the stadium's background noise, the tight end began what can only be described as an emotional outburst, venting his frustrations to anyone in earshot. The shock of the moment was encapsulated in the analysts' and former players' instant reactions. Now it's Travis Kelce. Amina, is it poisonous? This is true, but it works. This, in my opinion, indicates that frustration is growing. In actuality, though, no one had ever seen this before. Not in this situation. Not from Andy Reid. And most definitely not from a coach who is renowned for his calm approach to handling conflict with this degree of physical aggression. We must consider the larger background of the Chiefs' early season difficulties and the growing pressure that had been building within the organization in order to fully comprehend the significance of what transpired on that September night. Despite being the reigning champions going into the season, this team was being questioned about their offensive prowess for the first time in many years. Through their first 2 games, the offense that had previously been the epitome of effectiveness and explosiveness was now only scoring 17.5 points per game on average, a sharp decline that left supporters and commentators wondering if the Chiefs' window for a championship was closing. The pressure was beginning to get to quarterback Patrick Mahomes, who had been all but unstoppable during his career and had become one of the most clutch players in NFL history. Through the first 3 games, his completion percentage had fallen to 62.5%, which was significantly below his career average and a worrying sign of timing problems in the current game. The Chiefs were forced to rely too heavily on a passing attack that was obviously having trouble defining itself because the running game was inconsistent, with Isaiah Pacheco being held under 50 yards in 2 of the first 3 games. The early season difficulties for Kelce in particular were something much more significant than merely short-term growth pains or statistical shortfalls. This player had dominated his position for more than 10 years, had redefined what it meant to play tight end in the modern NFL, and had been Patrick Mahomes' safety net during 3 Super Bowl victories. Every game felt like it could be part of his farewell tour at 36, with speculation about his future and retirement plans rife. Helping his team win games wasn't the only reason he felt pressured to perform. It was to ensure that his last chapter would be written on his own terms, and to validate a legendary career. Few NFL players ever have to deal with the personal pressures that Kelce faced, and they went well beyond the football field. He had achieved a level of fame that went far beyond sports thanks to his well-known relationship with Taylor Swift, which also brought him ongoing media attention and scrutiny that had an impact on every part of his life. Some questioned whether he was still solely focused on football because of his commitments to the media, podcasts, and the ongoing attention that comes with dating one of the biggest pop stars in the world. Winning games was no longer the only thing that put pressure on players to perform. Against the Giants, he had to demonstrate that his renowned work ethic and priorities had not been affected by his newfound celebrity. In a spectacular way, all of these pressures, worries, and frustrations finally came to a head. The Chiefs had only managed 2 field goals on 6 offensive possessions when the incident happened in the final minutes of the first half. Only 130 yards had been gained by the offense in the first half. As the players headed to the sidelines after yet another failed drive that had resulted in another punt, the output was startlingly low for a unit that had once been among the most inventive and explosive in the entire NFL. In the most surprising way imaginable, the emotional wall that had been containing weeks of frustration finally broke. The events that followed were unprecedented in the Reid-Kelce relationship and marked a significant change in the power dynamics that had dominated their collaboration for more than 10 years. It was Reid who adopted the aggressive posture, rather than Kelce, who had typically made the first move to make physical contact in past encounters. Evidently irritated by the team's performance and possibly Kelce's emotional state, the 67-year-old coach gave the 250-pound tight end a hard chest-to-chest bump that almost knocked him off balance, according to witnesses. The reversal of roles was breathtaking. The physical wake-up call was now coming from the coach, which had always been the soothing force, the steady hand that steered the ship through rough seas. Though it only lasted a few seconds, the incident had a lasting effect that would affect how people saw both men for the rest of the season. Every detail was captured by cameras with the level of accuracy that is only possible with contemporary broadcast technology. Reid's enthusiastic gestures during his speech, Kelce's shocked response as he took in the unexpected physical contact, and the teammates' quick action to defuse the situation before it took a turn for the worse. The obvious shock on Kelce's face was what really stood out about this encounter. He had obviously not anticipated this from his longtime mentor and father figure. Both men swiftly moved on from the incident in the immediate aftermath, displaying the professionalism and emotional intelligence that had kept their partnership strong through many prior difficulties. However, the harm had already been done to their public persona and possibly to the underlying dynamics of their relationship. But you have to go back in time to see why this sideline altercation was so powerful and significant. Because tensions between Kelce and Reid had previously flared up. Actually, it was merely the most recent development in a lengthy string of explosive incidents that have shaped their relationship. The history behind the headlines, a pattern of explosions. During Super Bowl LV8, in what would go down as the most notorious sideline altercation in the history of championship games, the story of Reid and Kelce's tumultuous relationship really started to garner national attention. Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, February 11, 2024. In front of millions of people worldwide, Kelce gave Reid, 65, a shoulder-to-shoulder bump that almost sent him flying to the ground. In the midst of the year's biggest game, the incident was so shocking and unexpected that it overshadowed much of the actual gameplay. It quickly went viral and sparked national discussions about professionalism, respect, and the boundaries of competitive passion in professional sports. According to Reid's later explanation, the Super Bowl incident happened with breathtaking intensity. When I wasn't looking, he caught me. It's a fumble I saw. Another turnover occurred there. Yes, he was still unaware of your position. He came over and gave me a hug, but he didn't realize I was going that far, you know? I apologize sincerely for that. However, he simply wants to be on the field and play, you know? Although Reid's initial reaction to the incident demonstrated his trademark ability to diffuse tension with understanding and humor, the underlying problems were much more complicated and serious than his humorous explanation implied. The Super Bowl. The Chiefs' offense was in a particularly trying and crucial time when they were unable to perform at their usual championship level due to the pressure of playing on the biggest stage in professional football. Feeling totally out of place and underutilized in the most important game of the year, Kelce had only managed 1 catch for 1 yard in the first half. This degree of invisibility in the Super Bowl was both personally and professionally devastating for a player who had established himself as Patrick Mahomes' most dependable target in pivotal situations. Kelce's annoyance finally erupted in a spectacular way when running back Isaiah Pacheco fumbled at the 5-yard line during a pivotal drive that had the potential to alter the course of the entire game. A blindside shoulder check from the tight end sent the coach reeling forward and almost colliding with other players as he charged at Reid, who was engrossed in diagramming the next defensive adjustment while glued to his whiteboard. For those who saw it firsthand, the physical contact was startling enough, but what came next was even more startling. Hot microphones caught the verbal explosion that ensued in all its unadulterated, unrefined intensity. With a barrage of vulgarities, Kelce invaded Reid's personal space and yelled, "Open up the damn playbook and give me the all." He also made wildly erratic hand gestures. The altercation lasted almost 10 seconds, which is a very long time for a Super Bowl sideline. Eventually, teammates Chris Jones and Patrick Mahomes stepped in to break up the altercation before it got out of hand. One of the most iconic images of the entire Super Bowl, and a scene that would be repeatedly reenacted in the days and weeks that followed, was Kelce screaming just inches from Reid's face, his emotions totally out of control. How carefully both men had to handle the ensuing public relations nightmare was made clear by the Super Bowl incident's aftermath. Watching from a lavish suite with friends and family, Taylor Swift was obviously upset by the altercation, covering her mouth and leaning forward in apparent concern as millions of fans and members of the media scrutinized every facet of their actions. Many in the sports media field, including former players and analysts, immediately criticized the incident, wondering if Kelce's actions had gone beyond fierce rivalry to blatant disregard for team hierarchy and authority. Kelce's post-game responsibility demonstrated that he recognized the gravity of his behavior. "I can't get so fired up that I bump Coach, which throws him off balance and other things." When he stumbled, I was like, "Oh, my head." Or, let's be honest, the yelling in his face was extremely unreasonable. I believe there are better ways to deal with this in retrospect. Yes, I am aware that I am a passionate person. His quick admission of guilt on his podcast with brother Jason revealed a degree of emotional intelligence and self-awareness that helped deflect a lot of the criticism and showed that he understood proper boundaries. However, this pattern of erratic behavior predates the Super Bowl incident. Simply put, it was the most obvious and widely reported example of a dynamic that had been developing and changing for years. During Missouri Western State University's training camp in July 2023, Kelce got into 2 separate physical altercations with backup defensive players over the course of several days. Because they took place during private practice sessions, these incidents received less media attention, but they showed the same underlying intensity and emotional instability that would later blow up on the Super Bowl stage. A seemingly insignificant argument during a red zone exercise in the oppressive Missouri heat marked the start of the training camp altercations. DiCaprio Bootle, the rookie defender, tried to take the ball away after a completion, and Kelce got into a shoving altercation with him. Many people dismissed the several second-long physical altercation as just the type of intense competition that naturally arises during intense practice sessions, even though teammates had to step in to break it up. An even more serious incident that went beyond competitive intensity into potentially dangerous behavior occurred the following day. After dropping the ball during another red zone drill, Kelce delivered a powerful left-handed punch that struck linebacker Jack Cochran's helmet with force. Fans at the open practice recorded the punch, which swiftly went viral and brought attention to Kelce's emotional instability, as well as his capacity to maintain composure under pressure. Reid's philosophical approach to handling erratic personalities was demonstrated by his reaction to such incidents. Yes, I adore Travis's passion. I'm fine with that then. It wasn't enough for us. We didn't need to be in that second quarter, As a result, he is aware of when to push the pedal and when to back off it, all within reason. No, his calm reaction showed a coach who had long since come to terms with the fact that controlling Kelce's intensity was just a part of the job description and an essential part of optimizing his output. In an attempt to own up to his mistakes and accept responsibility for his actions after the punch incident, Kelce posted on social media saying, "I need to be a better teammate. I need to improve as a leader. It's simple." In the Reid-Kelce relationship, this pattern of explosive behavior followed by instant accountability and introspection would recur frequently. It suggested a level of emotional intelligence that helped explain why Reid tolerated and even welcomed these outbursts. Reid's coaching background and his development as a leader of erratic personalities also follow this pattern. Reid's tough love style was well known during his time with the Philadelphia Eagles. One such instance was making offensive guard George Hegman push a 500-pound blocking sled across the field in front of the team. Reid set the stage for the kind of intense, emotionally charged confrontations that would later define his relationship with Kelce by being willing to use physical punishment and public humiliation as motivational tools. The coach calmly whistled while putting the veteran guard through a torturous physical punishment in front of teammates, the media, and fans during the Hegman incident, which happened during Reid's first training camp with the Eagles in 1999. The psychological effects were immediate and devastating. Hegman never played in the NFL again after being released the following day. However, it also solidified Reid's standing as a coach who was prepared to take drastic measures to uphold his standards and who demanded complete accountability from his players. Reid's strategy has evolved and become more sophisticated over time, as evidenced by the transition from the Hegman punishment to the Kelce confrontations. Previously, he established dominance and control through physical punishment and public humiliation. Today, he engages in what can only be described as emotional negotiations with his star players. It appears that Reid has mastered the art of managing volatile personalities rather than merely getting rid of them, as evidenced by Kelce's survival of these encounters and subsequent success. Given this historical background, the September 2025 incident is particularly noteworthy because it could mark a shift in the relationship's basic dynamics. Reid made the first physical contact for the first time in their partnership. Reid, who went beyond verbal guidance to engage in physical combat. Reid, who used force instead of words to convey the message. This role reversal implies that even the NFL's most understanding and patient coach has a limit to how much he can take, and that Kelce's emotional outburst might be pushing those limits to their limits. This history prepared the ground for the events of September 2025. However, what transpired in the heat of the moment is not the only question. What happened next is what matters. The consequences showed how precarious the situation had gotten and what the Chiefs' future might hold as a result of this altercation, the fallout and its implications. In addition to revealing a masterclass in crisis management and damage control, the immediate aftermath of Travis Kelce and Andy Reid's altercation on September 22nd also revealed deeper rifts and growing pressures that might be developing beneath the surface of one of the NFL's most prosperous and closely watched partnerships. Reid's post-game press conference set the tone for how the organization would present what millions had seen on national television, and both men were working hard within hours of the incident to control the narrative and minimize any potential fallout. Reid's prompt action showed his signature ability to diffuse tense situations while retaining control. That's what I adore about him, I guess. Sometimes I have to be the cop, but the guy is all in. However, beneath the well-crafted diplomatic language and public statements, there were hints that this most recent conflict had touched on a deeper and more troubling issue than earlier instances in their tumultuous history. This time, Kelce's public response was noticeably delayed, and he was reluctant to interact with the media, in contrast to the Super Bowl incident when he accepted full responsibility and ownership for his actions right away. As a tight end who usually enjoys media attention and takes pride in his ability to express his thoughts and feelings, the tight end initially avoided direct comment, leaving the locker room before reporters arrived and turning down requests for interviews. For those evaluating the Chiefs' chances of winning a championship and long-term viability, this incident was especially worrisome given the larger backdrop of the team's difficulties. As the first defending Super Bowl champions to start without a winning record since the 1999 Denver Broncos, the Chiefs were in historically bad company going into Week 3, which raised serious concerns about their ability to continue winning championship. The conflict had been brought on by offensive difficulties that went beyond early season rust or passing growing pains. They raised important issues regarding the team's basic character and ability to adjust to the inevitable change that all championship organizations experience. With just 10 receptions on 17 targets for 134 yards and just 1 touchdown in the first 3 games, Kelce's individual stats gave a worrisome impression of a player who might be in decline. These stats were a considerable decline from the outstanding, game-changing output that had established him as the most dominant player at his position for more than 10 years, even though they were still respectable for the majority of tight ends in the league. Since he was 36 years old and his body was unavoidably suffering from the physical demands of playing in the NFL, it was getting harder to ignore or dismiss concerns about his future and his capacity to continue performing at the level of a Hall of Famer. The fact that the altercation took place during what many media outlets and industry insiders conjectured might be Kelce's last season gave the whole thing a sense of urgency and seriousness. Every game felt like it might be his farewell tour because his contract was set to expire after the 2025 season, and retirement rumors were circulating during the offseason. For Chiefs supporters, who had become used to seeing greatness and championship-caliber play, the prospect that his illustrious collaboration with Reid might end not with championship glory and mutual celebration, but with more frequent sideline altercations and outward expressions of annoyance was a sobering one. The organization's own immediate responses offered valuable information about how those closest to the situation were interpreting the incident. Usually tactful and measured in his public remarks, Patrick Mahomes was noticeably defensive when questioned about the incident. He emphasized Reid and Kelce's love and respect for one another while admitting that such conflicts energized the entire team. According to his response, even teammates who had become used to Reid and Kelce's tense relationship were starting to feel the stress and strain of these frequent occurrences. The timing of this specific incident in relation to Reid's coaching philosophy and his well-documented approach to handling challenging personalities throughout his career made it particularly noteworthy. Reid has established a reputation for handling difficult personalities during his time in Kansas City and Philadelphia. His success with Patrick Mahomes and other high-mannered players in Kansas City, as well as his early days working with stars like Terrell Owens and Donovan McNabb in Philadelphia, suggested that his typical approaches to behavioral management, communication, and motivation may be reaching their natural limits or losing their efficacy. Some positive insight into how the altercation affected the locker room dynamic and the players' capacity to transform emotional intensity into positive outcomes was offered by the immediate effect on team performance. With much better offensive execution and efficiency in the second half, the Chiefs rallied for a resounding 22-9 victory over the Giants. This implied that the confrontation's emotional release and intensity might have, at least temporarily, improved the team's concentration and output rather than acting as a diversion or a point of contention. For those examining the viability of this team management strategy, the long-term effects were unclear and worrisome. While emotional confrontations can occasionally offer temporary motivation and clarity, sports psychologists and experts in organizational behavior have pointed out that if they are not handled and resolved appropriately, they can also result in long-lasting resentment, problems with trust, and communication breakdowns. The Chiefs organization's main concern was whether Reid and Kelce could continue their long-standing, fruitful collaboration while dealing with these more frequent emotional outbursts and outbursts of annoyance. When thinking about the organization's long-term planning and resource allocation, It was also impossible to overlook the financial ramifications of the situation. The organization had substantial financial investments in both Kelce and Reid, as Kelce makes about $14 million 0 cents annually, and Reid is one of the highest-paid coaches in the NFL due to his contract. The team's championship window and competitive positioning within the AFC could be threatened if they had to choose between them, or deal with the constant distraction and disruption brought on by their altercations. The fact that the September 22nd altercation was much more than a mere coach-player altercation on the sidelines was still very evident to anyone watching the events. And now everyone is wondering if their relationship is irreparably ruined. To view more videos like this one, click on one of the boxes that is currently playing on your screen.